After all, it doesn't matter how you do it, just as long as it's effective. Okay, so forget about the introductions. Let's go on. I wanted to show these few pictures here to give you an idea of the burial landscape that I've studied over these 20 years. There have been other parts of the town where burials have been found, but they have been just grave pits, shallow grave pits without any tomb markers, sometimes with coffins. And here also what Mariusz was talking about, the tumuli, the cairn burials that are all around the town. When 20 years ago, Stephen Sidebottom and Willeke Vendrich wanted to start excavating in this part, they thought they would have the gate to the town. So in a way, the choice of the site for trench 44, that is why the incongruous numbering, because we kept the number of the trench that I dug in 20 years ago in order to continue this project. They chose something that to them looked like definitely architectural remains of substance in a terrain that was practically, even those mounds that Mariusz showed you, it is still very flat, as you can see. Here you have a view from the necropolis towards the camp and the sea beyond that. Perhaps that choice determined the fact that what was found in trench 44 was substantial architecturally. Here you have what it looked like in 2001, photos by Stephen Sidebottom showing these a part of that trench that was excavated at the time. However, the only part that has been published so far is not shown here, because this this corner of the trench actually contained whoops, I think yeah, wait. Yeah, I moved the cursor. Okay, this was the corner here was only partly excavated and really difficult to interpret. However, this work done 20 years ago is supplementary to what I did this year, because of course we did not excavate outside the enclosure itself. The tomb that is the focus of the presentation today in the tomb in an enclosure is, you can see it here in an orthophoto view, or whatever view, anyway, view from top view. This is the final view for the end of the season, with the enclosure clearly visible, the two tombs, the two shaft tombs inside the enclosure, and the third tomb that is like these two but is already outside. And if I do that, yeah, okay. You can see the this outline here shows you the extent of the old trench, where what was already published is the mausoleum that is now here covered, backfilled. Open terrain here. I know there's no tombs here because I've dug it. So this is actually, these three are a set in themselves. At the beginning, a close-up view of the enclosure with the parts that outside that we checked into the north. Hopefully, I was hoping for an entrance from the north, which did not happen. And this part on the south and the east, where I knew of the structures that were below and wanted to check it out. So we will come back to this later. Instead of giving you a sort of journal de fouille of the work done this season, I prefer to show you the shaft tombs in order of the parts that are important in a shaft tomb, starting with the shaft itself, which you can see here in a side view. The bottom is has the sides of the shaft at the bottom are lined with big slabs, irregular slabs, but there are no slabs on the floor. It's a just regular bedrock, the same kind of bedrock that you can see from the shaft going up. Then still geological strata, but different here. And on top of the surface, the stones of the superstructure that covered the tomb, with the corners in bigger slabs and the walls in coral. This is now here shown combined with drawings from 20 years ago, where I was able to then reach the tops of the slabs in this tomb. This tomb was excavated 20 years ago up to the top of the slabs. We could not continue at the time because the season had ended, and then there was no other season later. What you should note here is the third tomb that I showed you already outside the enclosure. This is the enclosure wall, the eastern part of the enclosure wall, and the tomb outside with a cairn of stones of coral heads above it, and another shaft different from this one in the sense that made of stone slabs going down. At the time, I thought it was a shaft divided into two, and I was presenting it as such over the years. But right now, I'm pretty certain that this is just a barrier shaft like this, except differently finished. This was not excavated this year. A top view of the shaft, actually the burial chamber at the bottom of the shaft. And you can see how irregular the stones are. And there's examination of individual stones has shown that they are definitely reused. So they must have been taken from the city, from some buildings in the city, considering the kind of recesses and cuts that can be observed on them. Like I said, there is no floor. The floor is actually a geological strata. The pebbles here that you can see, they are part of the geological strata into which these shafts were cut. In fact, you can see these pebbles in the walls here. You see also here the dark staining around this part. This is a picture from the exploration when this part had not been explored completely. This staining was visible also going around in various parts of the chamber. And I show you this a very distant photo from Soba East tomb, but showing very nicely how a coffin inserted into a burial shaft of this kind could have looked like if it had been preserved. In our case, it was preserved only as darker colored sand stain, but it was there. There were several, maybe several is the wrong word, but without an anthropologist who will see the bones only in the next season, I cannot say how many burials there were there. Rudimentary examination suggests at least 3 skulls, which were concentrated in this end of the tomb, and this end means it is the southern tomb. So the orientation of this burial chamber is north-south, and the heads were obviously to the south. However, this is an earlier view of the excavation. More of the wooden, it would have been a wooden plank at least 4 centimeters thick, really a strong box. But the concentrations of bones, the skulls on this end and the concentrations of bones seemed to be covered in more or less intentionally, although the whole thing looks very disarrayed, by halves of kegs, typical kegs that were used in the Eastern Desert in the 5th century en masse. They are here cut in half and used to cover clusters of bones, like here, like in this corner. There were practically no finds except a few, just a few iron nails with traces of wood rusted to them, which indicates that they came from the box in which the remains were placed. This is just a closer up view of the condition of the burials at the last layer of burials in this burial shaft. The other burial shaft, smaller, the one that I showed you, I forgot to tell you, it's like 2 meters long and about 90 centimeters wide, up to 1 meter wide. The smaller shaft is definitely shorter, although the same width. And it too is cut into the geological layers and has the bottom part of the burial chamber lined with the same kind of big slabs taken somewhere from the city. And the floor, again, a geological strata with the exception of these two flat slabs, which were irregular, which seemed to have been placed on the bottom with the only jewelry that was found, some beads, sort of squeezed into the crevices around them. This shaft contained burials in 2 kegs. I say burials because I'm not sure whether it's just one or more, whether the burial was, whether these are 2 burials or 1 burial with some kind of division between the bones placed inside them. Both of them were covered. This one was covered also. And you can see here the technical holes that were cut into the pottery body in order to break off the end and create an open container into which the bones could be inserted. This looks like an ossuary, basically. And then the cover was laid back on top of it. So we have we can actually recompose the whole pot. And the other one was different in the sense that it had a third half of a keg set on top of it, this one here. Half of a keg cut in crosswise was placed as a kind of cap, a lid on top of it. And I insert this photo here just to show you how, with attention, our Ababda carried the pots with the bones very carefully back to camp to await our anthropologist. Digging this shaft was obviously difficult. As you can see, the worker was practically as big as the shaft itself. So work to prepare this burial would have been quite difficult. And there is, obviously it was undisturbed, unlike the first tomb that I showed you. The fill to the top of the pottery was just sand. And after that, the surface was covered with broken stone, coral heads, pottery, also like rubbish that was found outside. The kind of finds, basically a very fragmented pottery that came, and ash that came from charcoal lumps, actually, that came from the fill of this shaft, suggests that the deposits were just taken from just outside the tomb to fill the shaft in, including layers of stone sort of to strengthen and actually fill the space, basically. So about a meter of this. This is the last set of coverings above the burial chamber. Then this 1 meter up to the surface, or to the superstructure, it was a mix of sand and stones and all kinds of things like that. Here, this top view shows you from the superstructure here down to this layer. And the superstructure itself, once you reach this level, was more densely packed with coral heads and stones and filled with sand to create a marker. Here you have the marker at halfway when we started opening it, and this is how it would have looked when they were building it. Rows of coral heads built around it with stronger stones in front. I mean, ashlars. I mean, cut stones, dress stones in front. And then each layer of corals introduced here, the inside filled, and then the next layer, until they achieve this form. And it is very possible that some loose mortar, even lime mortar could, but definitely mud mortar was used to plaster it over. This survived. This did not survive in very good condition, but I think we can assume that to the ancient users of this necropolis, it would have been a smooth plastered surface. A side view of this tomb showing you one more interesting thing. This spot here, where the ashlars are, is the front of the tomb, and we will see it in a minute, to which the rest is added. And you see that it is a very short superstructure because the shaft was small. The superstructure in the case of the other tomb would be longer. The front view of this superstructure, the front view of the superstructure of this tomb, during excavations, when we found the first set of incense burners and burning places where burnt offerings were found. And once it has been cleaned completely, you can see the first set, which is up here. And below this, the second set, the second niche with its set of incense burners. Now we can look at the other shaft tomb, where unfortunately all that we have left is part of the front, and you can see how it looks from this end. In 2001, I put the slide here to show you how the best form of preservation of ancient remains in Berenike, in the Eastern Desert, is simply to backfill them. This is how it looked in 2001. This is how it looks 20 years later. Practically no difference. So for the conservationists. A closer look at the front. This is the standing part of the bigger tomb, the superstructure in front. It would have had a niche like the one we saw in the other tomb here. But it was completely, as you see, the whole covering was completely destroyed by someone basically getting inside the tomb. There is a gap in the outer wall of the enclosure here and in the tomb itself here. And I refrain from calling them this robbers, as I've just read an interesting remark by David Edwards, that it's quite common in these tombs that the elements inside, the objects that are found inside are removed, and there's not much concern about it. It doesn't seem like it's robbing. They are usually removed quite early during the use of the tomb, with no great concern. And this is what it looks like here as well. These stones were lifted out, and you can see that some of them are very well dressed, others are broken. They probably formed the front with the niche. There are stones that could have belonged to that niche, and they would have formed a similar cover as this one, perhaps also some kind of covering of the burial chamber below, but there is no evidence for that. So coming back to what the front of the tomb would have looked like, the broken one. The third tomb, which is already outside the enclosure, it had a very similar niche. In this case, the top is broken, so the top of the tomb is broken, and it had a different kind of covering because it had a rectangular cairn over the shaft without the kind of building of a vault as we have in the other tomb. However, what is more interesting is that here we have preserved the pottery vessels and different also shells and organic remains that were placed as offerings, I think, around the tomb on the surface of the necropolis on the outside. Right here, here is the entrance to our enclosure. So this is a very complex, this is a very tight complex. I'll give you a closer look of what the niche with the incense burners looked like. In fact, this broken brick kind of adapted form of incense burner outside was found upside down. This one is in situ, as you see here, and it has a very the form is quite interesting, approaching the Cupoid incense burners that are known from much of Africa and Asia as well. And the decoration is incised, a sort of a running dog, as they would call them, a wave kind of motif incised on the sides. And the funny thing is that on one side, it is beautifully done, like a master did it. The other three sides are done like a student took up the work and was supposed to copy it and did it with much less ability. I will skip over this, but I found it interesting that in Nippur, and there's a whole long article about it, including ethnographic research in modern use of frankincense to fumigate tombs, including this prayer here that has been noted. Frankincense, you, the one who's going to the heaven, keep away from us the enemy and protect us from the hatred of the friend and enemy. An interesting, actually David Graff wrote about this long time ago, that the apparent spread of this cuboid form goes in tandem with the trading of Arabian resins overland, since most of the resin, if not all of the resin, used in Berenike, and we have plenty of evidence for that, came from either Southern Arabia or the northern Horn of Africa, then this falls well in place. During the excavations, it's important here only to note that the tombs were apparently used from two different levels, from the original level down here below, that would be the lower niche in the first superstructure that I showed you, and there was a second level like 30 or 40 centimeters higher up, evidently reuse, and this falls in line with what I will be talking about later this year, about the two phases sort of life in Berenike in the 5th century. The important thing to note here for now is that offerings in front of the tombs were placed quite prolifically. Outside the tomb as well, to one side of the entrance, we already saw a vessel in front of on the side of that other tomb. Here, and to the side of the entrance to this tomb, there is a kulla, very nicely placed, apparently in a kind of its own little enclosure of stones. While, yeah, you can see it here as well. This is the entrance. And outside the tomb, also on a sort of bench kind of thing that I think is a platform, but I'll talk about that at the end. There was a regular hot fireplace kind of thing made between stones with a very deep and not deep, with a thick layer of ash and plenty of pottery around it, mostly amphorae and drinking vessels. Apparently a cooking installation, which would have been quite normal in the necropolis. And it would also have produced that kind of fill that was found in the shafts. Sorry about this, but I couldn't find one without the boxes. This is already when we are backfilling it. And the entrance here is very well visible, the entrance to the enclosure next to this tomb on the outside. So it was really a kind of very cramped approach to this structure. The doorway was somehow definitely with a wooden frame, and there's also a sort of threshold that seems to have been treated with some kind of substance. Anyway, it looked like it was basically carbonized, and above it was another set of wood repeating sort of this threshold. And surprisingly, it's a very low entrance to go inside, assuming that because we really don't know how it looked above these 5 courses of corals in the walls. At the very last moment, the people using this tomb as their own protected it before leaving. So they filled it with stones. Well, at least this is my idea, that they filled it with stones as a way of assuring that nobody would enter. And this would entail the walls going up higher and there actually being a kind of roof over this enclosure. But there is no evidence for that I can come up with. So to me, it's still very mysterious how this worked. And now, last but not least, the enclosure. It's like 6 by 6 meters. It's fairly square. 5 regular courses of coral heads plastered, very probably mud plaster between them, and very probably plastered also into a smooth surface on the outside. Very evenly preserved all around the tomb, and apparently also standing on the 2nd floor inside the tomb with another wall below that. It remains still to be examined whether what we have down here is actually the older enclosure wall, or whether it was part of a platform. I've been reading up on tombs that are a tradition down south, because I'm fairly convinced that the idea for this kind of burial enclosure comes somewhere from, not from Egypt, not from the north, not from the east, somewhere from the south, from Nubian regions. The connection with the Blemians, with Meroe, with all that is interesting to explore at this point. You can see how cramped is the passage between this 3rd tomb outside and the enclosure. And you can see here also I think I need to go to the next slide. Yeah, you can see here very well in the photos from 20 years ago, what I thought was a wall going around, and actually including this 3rd as well, with a wall going northwards here in between the tombs. This could in fact be a platform like the ones that are found in for instance, in the Axum tombs, with shaft tubes being inserted into that platform, which would be the case here. You can see here the outside, like this is here the platform on the southern side, and this is here on the eastern side. And here also in profile, this outside And it was very unclear to me what happens here, and it still is. I know for now that this wall finishes and is placed on top of this platform. That is for sure, but I don't know what's underneath. Just as last week, Andrea Manzo was showing us that his finds from Axum, and I found it very interesting to compare at this point. Also the profiles here, this is the vessels outside, but then of course shaft tombs, as noted also for these tombs, they continue for millennia. So it's not like a direct analogy is forthcoming. And in any case, it's always about people, and I would like to thank my colleagues from the Berenike team this season, and the Ababda as always, because I think we've done a good bit of work. Thank you.